Section 7.3 is how to multiply radicals. There is a formula that if you have two radicals with the same roots, the roots are the same, then you could combine these two when you multiply into one radicals, and under the radical, you multiply the bases and keep the roots. Okay. So what is radical 2 times radical 5? They both have the root of 2. Remember, we don't have to write the 2 if the root is 2. So you combine them into radical 2 times 5, which is 10. So you combine into one radical, and then under the radical, you multiply. Cubic root times cubic root. They both have root of 3. So you combine into one root, and you multiply 2 times 5 is 10. They both have root of what? When you don't say any number, it means it's 2. You don't have to write it. So you combine into one, and under that you multiply 7 over x times 3 over y, which is 21 over xy. Make sure the whole fraction is under the radical, okay? Now what you have here in number 4 is we want to use quotient rule. What is quotient rule is, you know how we said in multiplication, you do it like this, okay? Sure. So if you have radical n root of a times n root of b, we said that is n root of ab. Now what if you have something like that? When you divide, in case of division, and if you want to combine into one, you under the radical, you put the numerator here and the denominator here. Or vice versa, if you have radical a, for instance, over radical, if you have the fractions under the radical, you could just write it like this. So if you have this, you could write it into 2 radical. If you have 2 radical, you could combine it. So you could split or combine. See, in this case, is this situations. So you write it as radical 3 over radical 100. And you understand, if you use your calculator, you see that radical 100 is 10. Or you could just say this is radical 100 is 100 is 10 to the power of 2. 2 and 2 cancel, so 10 is released. So it would be radical 3 over 10. So again, we are using this formula for these problems. If you have fractions under the radical, you could always break it into 2 radicals. That's what you have here. Same thing, you break it into cubic root of x to the power of 3 over cubic root of 64. 64 is 4 to the power of 3. So x is release and 4 is release. Again, what formula do we use? If you have n root of a over b, you break this into n root of a over n root of b. N is just the root. Like here, the root is 3, you just put that 3. Here you write it as cubic root of 9 over cubic root of x to the power of 6. 9 stay under the radical because 9 is 3 to the power of 2. So you cannot release any number here. But x to the power of 6, remember you take the 6 and divide by 3. So that would make it x to the power of 2. Okay? See, cubic root of x6, if we ask you to simplify this, there are 2 ways to do it. One is you just write x6 as x3 times x3, right? Then they both are coming out of the radical is x2, 1x and 1x. Or you could just say, you write this as x to the power of 6 divided by 3, which is x to the power of 2. There are 2 ways to simplify this. That we explained on earlier chapters. Number 7, you write it as x2y. $225. What is $225? Is 15 to the power of 2. Now, this x, because the power and root are the same, is released from the radical. Y remain. And this 2, you don't have to write it if you don't want. 15 also is released from the radical. Well, how do I know 225 is 15 to the power of 2? But, remember, anytime you want to break a number, always try to divide it by 2 and then 3 and then 5. So if you have 225, let's divide it by 3 first. Okay, I use my calculator. He said, okay, 225 divided by 3, 75. And 75 divided by 3 again is 25. And then 25 is 5 times 5, right? So 225, in fact, is 3 times 3 times 5 times 5. Or can we say 15 times 15 or 15 to the power of 2? All right, so in that case, that's how to break 225. That's how I figure is 15 to the power of 2. Now, you have cubic root of 250. I have to break 250. Again, when you want to break a number, always divide it by 2 first. And then if it's not divisible by 2 anymore, just divide it by 3. So here it said 250 divided by 2 is 125. Sorry. 125 is not divided by 20, but how do I know? Oh, give you a decimal. So what's the next number? 3. 125 divided by 3. Nope, it's not. So what's the next number? 5. So you always divide any number, you always divide by 2. If it doesn't work, then 3 and then 5. It doesn't work means if you don't come up with the whole number. If you come up with the decimal, we don't want that. So 125 divided by 5 is 25, okay? So this is 25, and of course 25 is 5 times 5. So 250 is 2 times 5 times 5 times 5. But remember, in this problem, the root is 3. The root is 3, right? So we write this as 2 times 5 to power of 3. So 250 is cubic root of 2 times 5 to power of 3. 5, exponent and root are the same, so we release 5 from the radical. So it would be 5 cubic root of 2. 2 remain because the power is 1. Cubic root of 54. Let's see how we divide 54. Again, we divided by 2 first. I use my calculator. Always divide by 2 first. 27. 27 is not divisible by 2, so the next number is 3. Divided by 3 is 9 and 3 and 3. Okay, so that's what 54 is. 54 is 2 times 3 to power of 3. Why do I write 3 to power of 3? Because the root is 3 here. Okay, so here you write it as cubic root of 2 times 3 to power of 3. Now, why 10? Why 10 means you take y and multiply by itself 10 times. You could write it as y to power of 9 times y to power of 1. Why? Because we want to put a number here which is divisible by 3. Okay? So look, 2 remain because the power is 1, is smaller than 3. But this 3, exponent and the root are the same, so 3 is released from the radical. Y to power of 9. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So y3 is released from the radical. So 2y remain. Again, refresh your memory from the earlier sections. When you have here, when you have cubic root of y to power of 9, there are 2 ways to handle this. One is, you know, y to power of 9 is this. Right? So you have y3 times y3 times y3. So instead of y to power of 9, you just write y3, y3, and y3, correct? And one by one, this y is coming out, the second y is coming out, the third y is coming out, which is what? Y to power of 3. You could do that, or you could just say y9 divided by 3 is 3. Okay, so that's how it works for that one. See here, what is y to power of 9? But see, the thing is, the root is 2. If you don't see any number, it's 2, right? So it's like this. And we know 9 doesn't go to 2. So instead of y9, why don't you write it as y8 times y1, or just y? This y is released from the radical. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So it's y4 radical y. And as I said, you don't have to put this 2 here anymore. 32, if you break 32, is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 5 times. So it would be -2 to power of 5. If you take -2 and multiply by, so 5 times -32. X 30, 30 goes to 5 goes to 30. And then y2. y2 remain under the radical because 2 is less than 5. So the -2 is released. X 30 divided by 5 is 6, and y2 remain. Same thing here. 64. Again, remember 64 when you divide it by 2 is this, right? And we talk about 32 is 2 to the power of 5. See, you keep dividing. So is 64 is 2 to the power of 6. So now I have cubic root of 2 to the power of 6 r to the power of 9 s to the power of 15. And then 1 by 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. Nothing remain under the radical. And you could write this as 4 RQ S5. See, all the exponents are multiple of 3. We talk about the quotient rule, and quotient rule, you said that if you have radical A over radical B, you could write it as, you could combine it as 1 fractions under the radical. Okay? So here we write this as radical 14 divided by 7 or radical 2. You want to apply quotient rule here, just keep the 6 away from the radical. 162 divided by 2, and the root is 4. 2 goes to 162 is 81. 81 divided by 3 is what? It's 27 divided by 3 is 9, is 3 and 3. 81 is 3 to the power of 4. 81 is 3 to power of 4. So we just write this as, so 6 has nothing to do with this radical. And then 3 is released from the radical. There is a 6 already sitting here. So 6 times 3 is coming out. 6 times 3 is 18. Nothing is under the radical. Again, you could always pause the, if you want to copy, you could always pause the pictures and write everything down. Again, we use the rule, combine into one radical. Under the radical, you have eight M6, because 2 goes to 16, and M1 and M7, 1 cancel, and it's 5, okay? Remember here, what is that? M7 and M. Isn't this seven of this cancel? How many is left? M to power of 6. Okay, so now 8 is 2 to power of 3. So 5, 3 and 3 cancel, 2 is coming out. 6 goes to 3, 2. So it's 10 M2. Keep 3 and 2 away from the whole thing. You know what's happening here? You had x2 over x to power of -1, right? Anytime you have a negative number, and the power would be 1 over x, correct? Or so what you have here, when you have a negative exponent, you write it as 1 over x, right? Or just say x2 divided by 1 over x, right? Which is x2 multiplied by, when you change your division to multiplication, what you do is you reverse it, right? So it would be x3. So instead of going through all these, you just need to remember that what you have in this formula is this. If your negative is at numerator and you want to change it to the positive, just bring it to the denominator. That's all it is. And vice versa. That means if you have a negative exponent at the denominator, you want to change it to positive, you have to just bring it to the numerator. So it would be x2 times x, okay? Example, let's say I have something like this, a to power of -2 and a to power of -3, okay? This is negative, right? You want to change it to positive, bring it up. This one is negative, you want to change it to positive, bring it to the denominator. And then this cancels, so is a. So that's what we are using here for these problems here. You know, here I brought x to power of -1 up and write it like that. Now these problems find the distance between a pair. It's kind of algebra problems that if you have 2 points, on the x and y axis, and 2 points are given, is 5, 2, and 10, 14. 10 and 14. So let's say one point is A and another point is B, right? So what you do is this. 5 and 2 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, that's 1, that's A. B is 10, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 14. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's say somewhere here. These 2 points. When we ask you to find the distance between these two, the formula is the distance, let's say D, is difference of 2x to power of 2 plus difference of 2y to power of 2. So if this one is x1, y1, and the second one is x2, y2, to measure the distance, this is a formula to use. And also, if we ask you to find, say, if we ask you to find the point exactly in the middle, coordinates of this point, the x of this point is x of m, or means middle, and y of middle. To find coordinates of this point in the middle, you have to take the average. So x of m is x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and y of the midpoint is the average of the y. So this is how to find the coordinates of the point exactly in the middle, and this is how to find a distance. So in these problems, they are saying, find the exact distance between these two pairs. Okay? So in that case, one of these points is x1, y1, the second one is x2, y2. It really doesn't matter which one is x1 or y1, but here, D is x2 minus x1, which is 10 minus 5 to power of 2 plus y2 minus y1 is 14 minus 2 to power of 2, which is 5 to power of 2 plus 12 to power of 2. Remember, don't do this. This is completely wrong. It's a summation. This is not this problem. Look, 5 to power of 2 times 12 to power of 2. In this one, since you are since you are multiplying, 5 is released from the radical because it's multiplications. 12 also is released from the radical, so it would be 5 times 12. But that's not the case here. When it's a sum, first you have to add these two, which is 25 plus 144. Okay, and then what you have under the radical is what? 169. What is radical 169? When you use your calculator is 13. And now, if you want to find the next problem, is saying 19, find a midpoint between these two numbers, okay? So there are two numbers given. One is -1 and -4, and -9 and 13. So let's say this is x1, y1, x2, y2. How do I find x of m? Is x1 plus x2 divided by 2 is -1, -9 divided by 2, which is -10 divided by 2 is a -5. And how do we find the y of the midpoint? Is take the average of those two. -4 plus 13 divided by 2 is 4.5. So coordinates of the point exactly in the middle, it's -5 and 4.5. So this is in case we ask you to find the coordinates of a midpoints. Okay, so that would be end of 7.3.